Wow, I got a mustache, huh? I do. You know when you forget that you have a mustache?
No more Davy.
But you love being Davy.
I do love being Davy, but being Davy caused Jake to get arrested.
It took me until episode 5 of Fiona and Cake before I really understood what its deal was. For a collective hour and a half over the course of 3 weeks, Fiona and Cake existed in this weird state of limbo where things were just happening and I was just watching it happen, not particularly invested, more so just confused. Okay, so it's about Fiona and Cake in the real world and they have like jobs and stuff. No? Okay, it's about Simon and and he's like sad and stuff. No? Okay, it's about Prismo in the time room and alternate dimensions and stuff. No? Okay, it's a serialized spin-off continuation of Adventure Time that takes place within the same canon of the original show, but with a multiverse quest for the Dragon Ball type twist. No? Okay. But then episode 5 happened and everything started to make sense, and I think it's really brilliant, and I kind of want to take some time to break down why and give my own subjective analysis. You know the deal. You know why you're here. Part 1, Adventure Time. Adventure Time is a really cute cartoon series following the adventures of a human boy named Finn and his magical dog named Jakes as they protect and keep the peace in the land of Oo, getting into a lot of trouble and kerfuffles, but having plenty of fun along the way. And later things get more surreal and spiritual, and I'm not qualified to explain what any of it means.
Come with me to the end and the beginning, or struggle here a while like a beautiful autumn leaf.
What's that bell sound?
What? Sometimes their adventures involve a deranged wizard named Ice King, who's ostensibly crazy, kidnaps princesses, and is really good at playing the drums for some reason. He's a really funny antagonist voiced by Tom Kenny, and he's barely a threat. He does stuff like write gender-bent fan fictions of Finn and Jake's adventures called Fiona and Cake.
So, what did you think of the fan fiction I wrote about you guys?
He does weird shit like that all the time, and that should give you an idea of like his threat level. Later, in one of the more shocking reveals of the show, it turns out that Ice King is actually a human antiquarian named Simon Petrikov, who was cursed by a magical crown. The crown gave him ice powers and immortality in exchange for his sanity and general well-being. And it's one of the craziest twists I've ever seen in a cartoon ever. It recontextualizes every single interaction we've had with the Ice King up until this point without retracting any of the original quality and value that the Ice King had as a character from back then. It's a brilliant example of writers recycling old canon to build new canon in a new exciting way that doesn't contradict anything from the past. Also, there's a sentient manifestation of an old man's dream named Prisma who's really into pickles and grants people's wishes in a time room, but don't worry about that too much. It's not that important. It's not a big deal. Don't worry about it. 10 seasons and a 4-episode special later, the adventure is concluded. I got a tattoo to commemorate the ending of my favorite cartoon, and that was that. Just kidding, the fun will never end. Part 2, Everyone is Depressed. Fiona and Cake kicks off sometime after the conclusion of the original show, and there are 3 catalysts who instigate the main narrative of Fiona and Cake, all of whom are experiencing similar unhappiness / lack of fulfillment. There's Prismo in the time room, Simon and Oo, and Fiona and Cake in generic big city fucking New York, I guess. It's important to note that each universe these characters inhabit are separate from one another. More specifically, it's revealed that Prismo created Fiona and Cake's universe illegally and then hid the illegal universe in Ice King's brain.
Hey, Ice King, can I store a fan-made alternate universe in your cursed dome?
Sure, Magic Flashlight. You can put anything you want in there. Especially if it's got a hot lady.
So when Ice King lost his magic and regained his sanity, it changed Fiona and Cake's universe in the same way, i.e. no magic, everything normal human world stuff, wiping everyone in Fiona and Cake's universe's memory in the process. If that sounds complicated, it's because it is. But it's actually really smart, and I'm going to talk about it more later, so put a pin in that, and we'll come back. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, they're all deeply depressed. So I think a good place to start analyzing each of the characters' unhappiness is by judging the messiness of their rooms. That's kind of how I keep track of my mental wellness. It's not looking too good right now, gang. I gotta keep it real with you.
My fucking battle station looks like the fucking end of Alan tutorial right now. That's how dire this shit is.
Fiona's apartment is the messiest. Clothes everywhere, unwashed dishes, old food, truly a trash palace fit for a queen. Trying to make it alone in the big city is stressful. Struggling to hold down a job she doesn't like, things unexpectedly going wrong. Her intro song spells out her suffering pretty clearly.
Every time I leave my room, I wanna die.
Prismo's time room is also a mess. Beer cans and frozen dinner containers half eaten in the bathtub. What a classy guy. He seemingly doesn't enjoy granting other people's wishes anymore or overseeing the multiverse, evidenced by his lethargy towards Wyatt's wish, as well as ignoring the crossover alert twice. So Fiona and Prismo's rooms are messy because they aren't trying to hide their unhappiness. They express it relatively clearly as they're feeling the frustration and whatever other emotion they're experiencing. Simon's room, on the other hand, is a literal exhibit that he has to keep presentable for the visitors who come in. But his suffering is clear as he's barely managing to keep everything together. After the curse of the crown was broken, Simon literally made made living in the past his job, being a sort of museum tour guide for a 20th century house that he now inhabits. A job that is constantly forcing his attention to the unhappiness of his present, the disconnect he feels from the past mushroom war, weird magic future world, and the people around him, further highlighting his loneliness and isolation. Not to mention that he's grieving immensely over the loss of his beloved Betty, who sacrificed herself to rid Simon of the curse of the crown and to keep him safe, becoming an indecipherable god of chaos in the process. This dude is one Phoebe Bridgers album away from the psych ward. Looking at his room, it's like he has to hide any external signs that could suggest he's struggling internally, like the secret shrine he has in the closet as well as the demonic choose goose he keeps in a cage, both of which he's secretly using for a magic ritual to try and contact Betty. Fiona and Prismo wear their emotions on their sleeves, being like emotionally honest to the people around them, allowing themselves to have messy rooms, whereas Simon tries to pretend that everything is okay for the sake of those around him, rarely allowing himself to open up to others, contributing to the heaviness of his burden.
You seem a little tense.
No, everything's fine.
Are your bad feelings gone?
Yeah, much better. I'm good. Works great. I made a little girl cry earlier today.
Wait, what was that? Can you say it again, louder?
It's nothing. Everything's fine.
He's just like me.
So again, this gets a bit complicated, but the order of events for the instigation of the narrative are as follows. In a failed attempt to see Betty again, Simon accidentally opens a portal for Fiona and Cake into his universe. Prismo intercedes and tries to send everyone back to their original universe in an attempt to hide the fact that he created an unauthorized one, but a god auditor named Scarab finds out and is determined to capture all parties involved, plus disposing of the unauthorized universe. Prismo sacrifices himself, giving Fiona and Cake his interdimensional remote so they can escape and find a way to save their rogue universe from annihilation, and Simon tags along to help. This is where the story really begins. Everything in the show up until now has been set up for the adventure that Simon, Fiona, and Cake are about to embark on. This is where shit gets free! But first, a tangent. Part 2.1, Prismo and Simon's motivation. So, in a way, Prismo is kind of Fiona and Cake's god. Like, he created them and their entire universe, you know, like, he's like God. And when Fiona and Cake step outside of their unhappy lives and discover a magical world culminating in meeting God, he tells them to get back to their sad little universe that they came from. Fiona has just had a taste of adventure, fulfillment, and the magic she was looking for that was lacking in her universe. And now he just wants them to go back to their messy apartment? Something to note is that up until this point, Prismo has been living in a stunted state of discontent, doing the bare minimum required for his job as wishmaster / overseer of the multiverse. And it was only a matter of time before that all caught up to him.
That's the last time I make an unauthorized universe.
Unauthorized universe?
Crap.
So imagine you're like an artist who works for a company, and that company will punish you if you draw whatever you want during that company time. So you have to like hide your furry BL comics in the janitor's closet and just pray no one ever finds it there. It's only when Prismo hears Scarab talk about destroying Fiona and Cake does he really snap out of his depressive state of inaction. At first, the only action he takes is to try and fix the crossover universe stuff so that he can avoid punishment. But in this moment, Prismo realizes that what he wants to avoid more than punishment is the monotony of his restrictive job. Because Prismo cares about his creation, he empathizes with them and feels that they deserve happiness despite the fact that their existence is cosmically unauthorized. Prismo sees Scarab. Oh, I'm gonna sneeze. Not gonna sneeze. Cool. He sees Scarab as a representation for the status quo, which he's become utterly bored and disillusioned to. Granting other people's wishes and keeping track of how their wish affects the entire multiverse has become a boring chore to Prismo that he's grown to resent. He sympathizes with Fiona and Cake's rejection of the status quo, not wanting to go back to their boring world, and sees the fact that they're willing to defy their highest authority, God, is admirable, and it inspires him to do the same, following in his creation's footsteps. So he helps them A, save their entire universe, and B, allow them to do what he desperately wanted to but never could, i.e. make a living off of furry BL comics. Or more generally, find fulfillment in a vast, uncaring multiverse, even if we're not really aware of the consequences of upsetting that status quo. But it's at least worth trying, jumping out of that box that you've been stuck in your whole life, or in Prismo's case, before the beginning of time. Reshifting focus, Simon has gone full Shinji Ikari at this point. He feels like he doesn't fit into his universe anymore and never will. The only thing keeping him from entirely checking out at this point is the idea that maybe by continuing this weird ritual, he'll be able to contact Betty again. And maybe if he has the one person he really loves and cares for in his life, he can stomach any universe that fate throws at him. But he had one last chance to make that happen and it failed. This man was desperate. He was willing to endanger the life of a living being in pursuit of his ends. God knows what other terrible things he's done for the same purpose that we just haven't seen. But he accidentally summons Fiona and Cake, closing his window to ever see Betty again.
This was my last chance to see her!
Knock it off!
My last chance.
You don't seem to understand. So when Fiona asks him to come with them, he's like, no. But Fiona gives him the PG equivalent of the Masato speech from End of Evangelion. I understand if you don't care if you live or die, but our entire universe is literally inside of you. So if you don't help us, everything we've ever known, including ourselves, will be gone forever. And he's like, okay, yeah, fuck, geez. Oh, I freaking love Simon. He's suffered for so long, and in this moment, he's like hit rock bottom. He doesn't have anything to live for anymore. Yet when faced with a call to action to help others, specifically Fiona and Cake, people who remind him of his dark, twisted, Ice King shitty past, he puts all of his baggage aside to help them. It's really admirable. He didn't ask for this responsibility, but once he recognizes that it is his responsibility, he puts everything down and helps. And I think this speaks volume to his character. Like if we think about how he was with that little girl who was obsessed with Fiona and Cake, as soon as he upset her or refused to sign her book or whatever the fuck she wanted, he felt bad. Like it didn't sit well with him. And I think it's because he was behaving in a way that was inauthentic to himself. He was letting his emotions give him weird outbursts that isn't what he is. He's a caring, kind, selfless person who finds fulfillment in helping others. So he helps Fiona and Cake evade Scarab. Just in time, they travel to another dimension where Simon comes up with a plan to save their universe forever.
I know a way I can protect you from the Scarab, bring magic back to your world, and make it last forever. I need to become Ice King again.
Part 2.2. That's kind of fucked up. So Simon is willing to sacrifice himself to save Fiona and Cake, but more sinisterly, a part of his calculation in doing this is because it'll end his suffering. Being the Ice King is like being in a fugue state. You become delusional and essentially an entirely different manic person. In my eyes, Simon becoming the Ice King again is kind of like dying. And Simon has expressed missing being the Ice King in an earlier episode. Not because it was pleasant, but because he wasn't aware of his own suffering.
I guess I missed being him in a way. Things felt simpler back then. I was too out of it to understand how screwed up my life was.
So his desire to return to that state is really dark, and if he was my friend, it's something I'd probably tell him to get help about. So when he makes this dark resolve, for the rest of the show, he essentially becomes a dead man walking. Every obstacle the group overcomes, every bonding moment that they share, it's all bittersweet because we know that ultimately this is all in service of Simon potentially ceasing to exist forever. His body and mind unrecognizably corrupted. A living reminder of what once was. It's probably more tragic than him just straight up dying. Part 4, the pin. So remember the pin? Yeah. So the conceit of the show is really complicated and requires like 5 episodes of setup to get us to where the story like really starts. This is because Adventure Time has an unfathomable amount of world building and moving parts over the course of 10 seasons and 4 episode specials. The writers had to carefully work with all of it in mind to make a follow-up that doesn't contradict anything from the original canon. I mentioned earlier how the original Ice King reveal was genius because it uses old canon to create new canon without stepping on the old canon's toes. And like if we look at the first 2 seasons of Adventure Time, the tone is incredibly lighthearted. There's so much silliness and random goofs, it's kind of part of the identity of old Adventure Time. But as the show evolved, more dramatic narratives and emotional dimension was added to the characters and plot lines. In season 2, episode 1, It Came from the Nightosphere, Marceline's dad casually calls Gunter the most evil thing he's ever seen.
Of all history's greatest monsters, you are by far the most evil thing I've encountered. Offer your soul to me, Dark One.
Which is a really funny aside, but in season 6 turns out to be kind of true.
Orgalord was banished to an inhospitable planet where he would forget everything. That the gravity of the planet did crush and compress Orgalord into a more powerless and cuddlesome form.
From a writing perspective, I doubt that they were thinking 4 seasons ahead to pay off this one like goofy joke. More likely, it was one of many funny asides that had the potential to be used for future world building and narrative creating, but whether this particular thing would be used and what it would be wasn't certain.
We're playing one of these games where you put everyone's character's name in a hat and you pull them out. And we pulled out Ice King and Marceline. And there was an episode where Ice King's singing the Fries song.
Daddy, why did you eat my fries? I bought them, they were mine.
And we're like, why is he singing that song? We've never seen them together. And we started like trying to brainstorm an idea. And from that came this whole backstory of Ice King when he was Simon was taking care of Marceline.
Like in season 2, episode 8, Jake shares a dream with his brother Jermaine, and it's kind of a really random funny aside.
Jermaine? Are you dead? No, man, we're just dreaming at the same time.
But that detail comes up again in later seasons and is used to drive narrative. Also, I wrote in my notes that this episode ends with a Drain Gang song. But not everything does. come back again, not have a Drain Gang song in it. Some funny asides happen and then we never see them again. Like the weird fart people that live in Finn's stomach, or the fact that Jake's imagination can affect the real world. But all the setup in Fiona and Cake expertly work with the original canon in a new exciting way that allows for so much freedom in terms of tone and substance. I found myself thinking, oh, but surely this will contradict something from Adventure Time, right? And then the more I thought about it, the more I realized how well thought out everything was to not step on anyone's toes. Okay, why can't we just use Fiona's swordsmanship or Cake's magic abilities to overpower any obstacle? Because up until very recently, Cake's been a house cat and Fiona's been a tour guide. Because their universe exists in Simon's head, they don't have any of the experience they used to have before the curse of the crown was broken, which narratively creates interesting encounters where we can't just predict how they're gonna get out of any hostile situation. Because Simon becoming Ice King again would theoretically return Fiona and Cake's world back to its original magic state, as well as the fact that it would give Simon the ability to fend off against Scarab. It follows that the group has to travel across different universes, but specifically different universes that already have a crown in them. This means that the writers have the freedom to explore universes that we've already seen in the Adventure Time canon, like Finn's Wish universe, or fabricate an entirely new universe, pulling as much or as little as they want from the original show's canon. Like the one where Brian David Gilbert voices the Winter King, the Winter Prince.
So this happens a lot.
Not this part. This is an escalation.
By the way, I know no one asked, but here's my reaction to confirming that it was his voice.
That sounded so much like him. Honestly, the voice actor choice just made sense. It is! It's him!
It feels like taking spare parts of a car without sacrificing the car's integrity to build an entirely functioning aeroplane as a vehicle to deliver the story on. Kind of genius how everything connects so perfectly and kind of explains why so much setup was necessary. Find a way to segue into talking about the Mitchells versus the Machines. Part 5, The Mitchells vs. the Machines versus horror movies. The Mitchells vs. the Machines is a 2021 computer-animated science fiction comedy film produced by Sony Animation Pictures, thanks Wikipedia. The film follows the dysfunctional Mitchells family as they wind up having to save the Earth from a global uprising of robots during a road trip. It's awesome. Eric Andre voices a guy in it, so does that one dude from all the weed movies I watched in high school. The road trip is organized by the father of the family, Rick, in an attempt to repair his troubled relationship with his daughter, Katie. The most emotionally compelling element of this film is the family's rupture and repair narrative. Fighting giant robots and Furbies is cool and all, but the way the film couples the fantastical larger-than-life elements to the grounded emotional story complement one another in a way that heightens the impact of the grounded narrative. We see that Rick and Katie's relationship has been in disarray for a while.
We haven't had a good family picture in years because you two are always arguing.
Huh. Well, what about that one?
That came with the frame!
The film starts the day before Katie is supposed to fly to LA to attend a film school in pursuit of her passion. The family has a dinner that night, which ends in an argument between her and her father. Rick doesn't understand or support her decision to pursue the arts, which over the years has resulted in Katie feeling like her dad doesn't believe in her / thinks she's gonna fail.
Dad, this is exactly why I'm excited to leave tomorrow.
I want to highlight that the emotional experience of a high-intensity situation like this can feel like the world is ending. The connection between father and daughter permanently being severed forever because of their inability / unwillingness to empathize or understand one another is earth-shatteringly sad.
Every kid leaves home. It's not the end of the world.
The robots plan on casting out all the humans into space, never to return, which mirrors the fear that Rick has about Katie never coming back or keeping contact after she goes to college. It's too real. I need to call my dad. By the time Katie realizes how much her dad sacrificed for her, and when Rick realizes how to listen / believe in his daughter, this is heightened by the family defeating all the robots and singing Maya He. So they suddenly become very competent in flying robots and shooting lasers and stuff. But that sudden confidence represents like an emotional thing. So we can overlook how they lack the training needed to do all that stuff because we recognize that it serves more so to strengthen the emotional impact of the repaired relationship. A lot of horror movies use the style of narrative enhancement, where there's a grounded emotional tragedy tied to a supernatural horror that can be interpreted to physically represent and enhance the internal / emotional experience of the tragedy. Hereditary, The Babadook, Evil Dead Rise, The Witch, and Antichrist are all about a family being tormented by a supernatural presence in the wake of something tragic happening. There's probably a ton of others. Horror movies do this shit all the time. In the horror comedy Bodies, 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 our emotional experience of being at a party where the people attending all have unresolved issues with one another that aren't being spoken about, manifesting as uncomfortable passive aggressiveness and cold shoulders, is captured brilliantly.
What the fuck does that even mean, Greg?
What's up?
Best defense is good offense. What does that mean?
Oh, you know, best defense is a good offense.
Well, what does it mean, though?
It can feel like we're not safe and have to be on guard all the time because we don't know when someone's being bothered by something and when that botheredness is going to express itself inappropriately. There's so much unresolved tension that's constantly rearing its head up to the surface, so we consistently feel uneasy even though it's supposed to be a party. The partygoers play a game called Bodies, 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 and it unintentionally primes them to be super suspicious and paranoid around each other when a real body is discovered, which is like an allegory for how unspoken relationship issues prime us for conflict, and how lack of communication can breed mistrust and insecurity. The grounded and emotional narrative of friendship problems is complemented and heightened by the murder. A common horror trope is when a character sees some spooky stuff going on and no one believes them. It totally maps on to how it feels to know something is wrong and have no one believe you or take you seriously.
2 of our friends are missing.
No, 2 of your friends are somewhere in the park drunk.
No, they're not. No,
I think people have a hard time taking something seriously if they haven't experienced it themselves. As someone who has a lot of anxiety and insecurities, I can often get overwhelmed, and it's something that is sometimes not taken super seriously or hand waved away as something I should just get over and stop complaining about. So when a monster can represent our internal emotional turmoil made external, and the protagonist tries warning others only for them to either downplay or hand wave their concerns, it's emotionally cathartic when they're proven wrong in an incredibly visceral and physical way. Take that, Deborah. A really cool way we see this stuff in Fiona and Cake is when the ongoings in their original non-magic universe is mirrored with what's happening in whatever universe the group finds themselves in. It's like a playful dance between the A and B plots. At first it's mostly aesthetic mirroring, but there's also some thematic mirroring. Pitching your idea to investors can feel like a battle. Standing up to your emotionally draining and overbearing mother can feel like standing up to her powerful vampiric being. These parallel shots complement and enhance the impact of one another. In this specific instance, Marceline offers to let Princess Bubblegum join her vampire regime, but PB refuses as it's too reckless and immoral. This mirrors how Marsha Lee invites Prince Gumble to join his mom's high society business world, but PG thinks it's immoral and figuratively soul-sucking to Marshall. PG's refusal of this would essentially mean being blacklisted by all potential investors, making his dream to start his own bakery significantly more difficult. PB's refusal results in a suicide pact, and there's a beautiful symmetry to this, where PG's business prospects dying is sealed with a kiss synced to Marceline and Princess Bubblegum dying together. Yeah, it's pretty powerful. Going back to the idea of internal emotion being expressed externally via horror movies or the Mitchells, I think that Scarab works as a really effective villain in this regard. He serves the job of being an externalized representation of emotional discomfort plaguing our lives, as well as a narrative tool to push the adventure along and give everything some stakes. Our main characters are experiencing emotional turmoil at the hands of circumstance. They all have a looming cloud of despair over their lives that they're barely evading, and that they don't really know how to tackle. Fiona feels like her life is meaningless and uninteresting, like she's meant for something else. Prismo feels like he's just going with the motions and isn't particularly interested in doing his job anymore. Simon feels like his only reason to live is escaping him more and more every day. They're all unhappy and unfulfilled, just continuing to exist for...
Every day is just an unending slog towards what?
With this in mind, we can view Scarab as the externalized inner turmoil, emotional stuff that we try to get away from every day. I'm avoiding whatever that is right now by making a video essay. Before that, I was avoiding it by watching Fiona and Cake, and before that, I was doing something else. It could be the existential anxiety we feel about our future, whether we're going to make it or not. If this next career move or whatever play is the right one, what if things aren't going to work out? It's the thought that we're inherently unlovable, broken people who are going to be alone for the rest of our lives, that everything is meaningless. It's guilt, it's pain, it's terror, it's death, it's coming, it's real. We see it catch up to Simon when his last chance to perform the ritual to see Betty again fails. We see it catch up to Prismo when he accidentally spills the beans to Scarab. We see it catch up to Fiona when Cake's mad at her and she starts questioning every decision she's made up until this point. Hot, raw, painful emotions about the reality of our situations. I don't know what you're going through in your life right now. Maybe something inside of you feels uncomfortable as I'm saying all of this. Your own Scarab that maybe you're running from or something. Towards the end of the series, Fiona and Simon are out of universes to run to and have to sit face to face with their Scarabs. Simon in front of his incomprehensible goal Betty, and Fiona in front of the universe-destroying Scarab. However, in the face of her world ending, Fiona realizes that she's attached to her universe, and through experiencing all these different ones, did she realize the thing that was missing was not more magic on the outside, but it was the lack of magic internally, in herself, which she finds in acknowledging the meaningful relation she has in her universe, and the desire to cherish and connect with those people in her community. Once Simon is able to gain perspective on his relationship with Betty, and what led both of them to the decisions each of them made, he was able able to accept the loss of Betty instead of wishing things could just be different all the time. It's then that he realizes that he only offered to be the Ice King in the first place because he felt like his life didn't matter. But putting in so much effort to protect the existence of others helped him realize that his life is just as valuable as the lives of those he strives to protect. His life has the potential to change and help other lives, and vice versa. All life has the potential to do that. His life isn't less valuable than any other life. Just because we feel like our lives lack meaning doesn't mean we're not worthy of life. It just means we get to discover and rediscover that worth and that meaning that's been in front of us the whole time. But if our internal world is too focused on outrunning our scarabs, we're never going to be able to acknowledge that. Let Simon serve as an example. You can follow in his footsteps. Face that internal discomfort head on, preferably with the guidance of a therapist and not confronting a giant, physical, immortal, multi-dimensional being. Simon literally goes to therapy in this. Fucking amazing. Before this video ends, I also have to mention that Kendall's song Blue Shift is used in the closing episode of the final episode of Fiona and Cake, and it's amazing. I was so shocked. I thought that sounded like Kendall, but I was like, is that a Kendall song in Adventure Time? What? And my brain kind of exploded. Please go check out Kendall's music if you haven't already. I am so in love with everything that they put out. I'll put a link in the description. I'm so done, dude. Oh my god, this took so long to record. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Watch my other videos if you want. Whatever. I don't fucking, who cares?